One of the important turning points in Ursula K. Leguin's novel, The Tombs of Atuan, takes place at the very end of chapter 7 of the work. So really just a little past the midpoint. And there's a line that I'm just going to read to you as our beginning. He raised his face to her. His expression was strange. "Take care, Tenar," he said. That's Ged talking to Arha, the eaten one, who was named Tenar, and he is in effect giving her her name back. He's giving her a clue to her genuine identity. Although, as we're going to see, it's not quite so simple as just being given a name and then you follow along a path or having your name restored to you and now everything falls into place the way it often does in movies, doesn't it? And in bad fiction. So there's a lot to be said here. And I think one of the things before we talk about Arha or Tenor herself is a little bit of thinking about the roles of names in Earthsea as we get it in this novel and in the previous novel, A Wizard of Earthsea, and in the two short stories that we had prior to that, the Rule of Names, which tells us a lot about names, and the Word of Unbinding. So language itself matters a lot in the narrative universe of Earthsea. And everything has a name. Ged will actually tell Tenar a little bit about this further on in the work when he's explaining how he ferreted out her name and why names matter. Suffice it to say that the true name of a thing or a human being or even a dragon gives you a sort of power over it. And so in most of Earthsea, in what the Kargish people call the inner lands, meaning the rest of the world, people conceal their true names and they go by a nickname or a use name, it is sometimes called. So Ged is Sparrowhawk. His friend Estariel is Vetch. It's a little bit different for the Kargish people because they don't do magic and they view sorcery as an accursed art. They have names, and it's not entirely clear whether these are genuinely true names or not. They are for each of the people. And Tenar has been given what in the rest of Earthsea would be a child name, right? Ged was Duni before he was given the name Ged by the mage Ogion. In this case, we have a child who is born and who is growing up in this village, not getting to grow up very much, basically just to 5 years old, and then she's going to be taken by the priestesses to Atuan, to the Tombs of Atuan. She's living in Atuan up in the north, and she's being brought down there. And so she goes through this ritual. Up until that time, she is Tenar. But she goes through this ritual in the very first chapter, and she loses her name. It is taken from her. There's a chant, "Oh, let the nameless ones behold the girl given to them, who is verily the one born ever nameless." She's born nameless. Why? Even though she has a name. Because she's going to be taking on another word, which isn't quite a name. "Let them accept her life and the years of her life until her death, which is also theirs. Let them find her acceptable. Let her be eaten." Other voices, shrill and harsh as trumpets, replied, "She is eaten, she is eaten." And this is repeated several times. What does it mean for her to be eaten? Well, she is the eaten one, Arha. That is her name going forward. But is it really a name? This is an interesting question, something we should linger over, something that's not speculated on in the story. Her identity as the child that she is being taken by the nameless ones, the great powers of the earth, who cannot be named, right? They're ancient, they're perhaps eternal. What is it to have your name, your identity, eaten? Well, it means that since you still exist, there's room now for you to be something else. But according to their views, it's room for you to be what you truly are, in this case, the previous Arha, who did not have that name when she was a little girl and went through this ritual and then became Arha. Right? So the eating is, you could say, a stripping away of the outer identity rather than the true identity, which then can develop and shine forth, perhaps, right? And we notice that at the end of this chapter, this eunuch who's been taking care of her and will be her servant throughout the entirety until he dies, still calls her Tenor. He says, "Ho, are you there, Tenor?" And he says, "Tenor, my little honeycomb, there you are. I shouldn't be here. I belong outside the door, but I had to see how my little Tenor is after the long day of it. How's my poor little honeycomb?" So he's using this nickname for a diminutive, what we call a name of love, right? A name of affection, and naming her by her name. And what does she say? "I am not Tenor anymore." And he says, "No, I know. You're the little eaten one, but and she says, and then he says, "It was a hard day for a little one." And now he no longer uses her name. So now she is free to become Arha. This is going to change as she encounters Ged. But she won't encounter him under that name, of course. And we have a really interesting exchange when they're first talking with each other. She says, "What's your name?" "Well, I'm mostly called Sparrowhawk." "Sparrowhawk? Is that your name?" "No." "What is your name then?" "I cannot tell you that." "Are you the one priestess of the tombs?" "Yes." So let's pause there for a moment. Why can't he tell her? Because his true name would give her power over him. And right now, she already has power over him. She is the priestess of the tombs, serving the nameless powers that he is holding back. And he is an outsider committing sacrilege within this. They have an antagonistic relationship at this point. She has the idea of making him a servant, a slave of the tombs, right? And a slave of her as well. So he's not going to give her his true name. And this is a good Earthsean kind of thing, very smart for a wizard. So, "Are you the one priestess of the tombs?" "Yes." "What are you called?" "I am called Arha, the one who has been devoured." "Is that what it means?" His dark eyes watched her intently. He smiled a little more. "What is your name?" "I have no name." "Do not ask me questions. Where do you come from?" So she doesn't have a name in the way that he does, at least in her view, right? Arha is not a name. It's a calling. You might say it is a title, but also a description that only applies to one person in any given lifetime. So they have two different ways of kind of being cagey with each other. A little bit later, we're going to find Ged renaming her. I mentioned this passage at the end of chapter 7, and this leads into something happening for Arha. She has a dream, right? She dreamt of the souls of the dead on the walls of the painted room, the figures like great bedraggled birds with human hands and feet and faces, squatting in the dust of the dark places. They could not fly. Clay was their food and dust their drink. They were the souls of those not reborn, the ancient peoples and unbelievers, those who the nameless ones devoured. They squatted all around her in the shadows, and a faint creaking or cheeping sound came from them now and then. One of them came up quite close to her. She was afraid at first and tried to draw away, but could not move. This one had the face of a bird, not a human face, but its hair was golden, and it said in a woman's voice, "Tenor," softly, tenderly, "Tenor." She woke. Her mouth was stopped with clay. She lay in a stone tomb underground. Her arms and legs were bound with grave clothes, and she could not move or speak. Then she really wakes up. And she goes through her, morning rituals, goes outside, and then she says, "I am Tenor," she said, not aloud, and she shook with cold and terror and exaltation there under the open sun-washed sky. "I have my name back. I am Tenor." And she asks herself, I'm so hungry. How did he know? How did he know my name? "Oh, I've got to eat. I'm so hungry," right? So there's a realization on her part that something very important has taken place. Something has changed. Getting her name back is meaningful. And a little bit later in that chapter, she is going to ask Ged, how did he know her name? This is after her, telling about. Actually, this is in the next chapter, telling about how the nameless ones didn't do anything and maybe their powers are waning. And Ged says, no, they really exist. Then she changes the topic. How is it that you know my name? And here we get this really interesting depiction of Earthsea and names there, and then a discussion of how Ged ferreted out her name. He says, knowing names is my job, my art. To weave the magic of a thing, you see, one must find its true name out. In my lands, we all keep our true names hidden all our lives long, from all but those whom we trust utterly, for there is a great power and great peril in a name. Once at the beginning of time, when Segoy raised the isles of Earthsea from the ocean deeps, all things bore their own true names, and all doing of magic, all wizardry hangs still on the knowledge, the relearning, the remembering of that true and ancient language of the making. There are spells to learn, of course, ways to use the words, and one must know the consequences too. But what a wizard spends his life at is finding out the names of things and finding out how to find out the names of things. Notice the distinction there. Finding out the names of things is one activity. Finding out how to find out names of things is yet another important activity. And then she, after being given this very general discussion, she says, well, how did you find out mine? He looked for a moment, a deep, clear glance across the shadows between them. He hesitated for a moment. I cannot tell you that. So he cannot bring into language and articulate precisely how he found out how to find out her name. Right? You are like a lantern swathed and covered, hidden away in a dark place, yet the light shines. They could not put out the light. They could not hide you. As I know the light, as I know you, I know your name, Tenar. That is my gift, my power. I cannot tell you anymore. So this is a very important realization. This is something that Ged is telling her that will help her understand that it was not just an outer husk that was eaten, it was instead who she was in herself that was being taken from her until it was restored. They could not completely take it away, but they could at least take away her capacity to articulate it. He tells her that she is going to have to make a choice between being Tenar or Arha. He says, either you must leave me, lock the door, go up to your altars, and give me to your masters, then go to the priestess castle and make your peace with her, and that's the end of the story. Or you must unlock the door and go out of it with me, leave the tombs, leave Atuan, come with me overseas, and that is the beginning of the story. You must be Arha, or you must be Tenar. And now, so notice what he's saying there. It's not just, well, you got to act like this kind of person or this kind of person, and, it's an important choice, so think it over. He's saying you can go on with the story that you've had up until this point and be Arha, be that character, and then your story effectively ends. It won't end because you're going to die right now. It's just going to repeat over and over and over again. Nothing will change. Or you can start a new story as not a completely new character, but somebody who is new to you within yourself, Tenar, who you have not been now for over 10 years, more than 2/3 of your life up until this point. You have to choose. Who will you be? What name will you take? In doing that, he does something else. She says, if I leave the service of the Dark Ones, they will kill me. If I leave this place, I will die. He tells her, you will not die. Arha will die. I cannot. To be reborn, one must die, Tenar. It is not so hard as it looks from the other side. And he goes on and he says, listen, Tenar, I came here as a thief and enemy against you. I am going to trust you. My true name is Ged, and this is yours to keep, and he hands her the ring. So he's giving her a double gift, a gift of the ring that he's been seeking to find the missing part of and then restore, which has vast implications for Earthsea as a totality. But he's also opening up to her his innermost vulnerabilities in telling her that he is Ged. She'll actually mistakenly use this when she talks to him in as they're going to the village, right? He disguises them as people, and then she looks at him and he says, "Oh, you are Ged." As she said his name, she saw him perfectly clearly, the dark, scarred face. She knew the dark eyes, yet there stood the milk-faced stranger. And he says, "Don't say my true name before others, nor will I say yours." Why? Because it gives power, right? And so she's being a little bit fast and loose with that because she's not quite used to Earthsea's use of true names, but he has given it to her. So there's a lot going on with this topic of names, and Tenar's restoration of her name is absolutely central to the story.